One story that really messed with me was when I was a freshman in college. I was sitting next to my best friend, and in the middle of the lecture, she whispered my name. I looked at her and asked what, and she said nothing. We went back to note-taking, and she whispered it again, more urgently. I annoyingly asked her what she needed, and she looked at me like I was crazy. I realized that the whisper was coming from the side she wasn't sitting on, and I was sitting next to the wall with no one on that side. I called another friend that night to tell him about it because I knew he would believe me. I remember saying that it was a young woman's voice, and I didn't know anyone that young who had passed away, except I did, and it was his sister, and it would have been her birthday that day. He didn't tell me. My mom did when I got home and told her the story. I knew immediately it was her and went to her grave later to apologize for not remembering. I woke up out of bed in the middle of the night. I walked into the living room and saw my dad slumped over and walking to the front door. I just stood there and watched as he walked outside and sat down on the sidewalk that went up to the front door. I watched him through the window for a second, and he just sat there staring into a tree with no expression on his face. He looked really pale and almost bluish. I then walked down to my parents' room and I woke up my mom and asked her why Dad was sitting outside. Then I will never forget it. She said, "What are you talking about? He's right here." And I looked over her and my dad was laying asleep in bed. Still scares me to think about. My family and I had just rented this beautiful historical house that was built around the Underground Railroad era. It had small hideouts and doors where slaves would hide out in. As soon as we moved in, we got uncomfortable vibes from it. We'd hear footsteps coming from upstairs when everyone was downstairs. The TV would turn off and on by itself, and doors would open and close by themselves. We eventually accepted the fact that we had a ghost and it seemed harmless, so we called her Claudia. Each of my family members had at least seen Claudia once. She was a tall, dark figure who would move fast. Most of the hauntings would come from my bedroom. It was always cold and had an unpleasant smell. My little brother began sleepwalking and would have terrible nightmares. One night became the final straw for my family and our relationship with Claudia. My sister and I were away at our friends while my parents and brothers were at home. The whole house was asleep when my dad woke up from screaming coming from my bedroom. When he ran out past the living room, where my little brother liked to sleep because of his sleepwalking, he noticed that my brother wasn't there. So he ran upstairs where he met my older brother who had heard the screaming as well, and they both saw my bedroom door was shut, and they realized that it was my little brother screaming in my room. They both went to open the door, but it was like something was blocking it. So finally my dad busted down the door, and as the door flew open, a black shadow ran right past him and my brother. He then entered my room that was so cold that he could see his own breath, looked over at my little brother, who was laying on my bed and covered in sweat and tears, and started yelling his name to wake him up. But my little brother just pointed, still asleep, at the corner of the room and started yelling, "Get her, Daddy, get her." My dad looked over but saw nothing but pitch black. That was enough for him. He quickly grabbed my brother, who was as stiff as a board, and ran the hell out of there. When my brother woke up the next day, he had no memory of what had happened that night and still doesn't remember when he talks about it almost 5 years later. We moved out of the house a few weeks after the incident, and my brother stopped sleepwalking as soon as we did. We've heard a few other stories from the people who currently own the house, but nothing quite as terrifying as what happened to my brother or my dad. That house has a great history behind it, but it was too creepy for my family. I was in Africa, Congo, during the mid-90s with the US military giving support to the US Embassy because Zaire was having a rebellion. It became the Republic of Congo. One night I was out by the fence and one of the Marine guards told me in passing that they had been watching some weird shit out in the jungle area outside our fence line. I borrowed one of their NVGs, night vision goggles, and after looking out there beyond what you could see with normal light, I could see some strange people moving around out there. Short, very, very skinny, with very large heads. One looked our way, and the person had huge eyes. With night vision goggles, everything is green, but the light is very magnified, so the eyes were easy to see because they reflected light different than the rest of the face. They never got any closer, so we couldn't hear them, and since it was outside our fence line, we didn't go see who or what they were. Scared the shit out of me that night. When we were growing up, we were best friends with a brother and sister pair who were our exact ages, so we spent all of our time with them and at their house. Their house was big. It even had a movie theater in the basement. My brother and I slept over often, and the four of us usually slept in the basement in the theater since it had a huge sunken couch that fit all of us. Around the time I was about 9 or so, and brother was older so he remembers it better. Our friends were really excited to have us over because they had gotten a few couch cushions in the crawl room, so it would be like camping. Brother and I had no idea what they meant. We knew every inch of their house, so when we went to see this room in their basement around the corner from the theater, there was a short door, so short that we had to crawl through to get in. Brother and I had never seen this door before, even though we had practically grown up in this house. We questioned it, but neither of us remembered the answer they gave other than they just found it. They were rich, so I guess we assumed it was new construction. Anyway, we slept on couch cushions in that short room that night, and neither my brother or I can remember anything remarkable about it, and we slept in the theater again after that night. The remarkable thing happened a few years later. It was my friend's 14th or so birthday, and I was keeping her busy while her brother was hiding her present, presumably in the crawl room. At the end of her birthday party, he brought up the crawl room. He said something like, "You remember going in and out of there a few times, right?" I said yes. He looked confused and asked me to show him where I remember the door being. We go into the basement and lo and behold, there is no door. Not even an outline where it would have been sealed. My brother kicks the wall and it's solid cement. We ask our friend's parents and they have no idea. They've never done construction down there and there is no room other than the theater in the basement. I was in this room in the basement. All night, we sat on cushions in there and brought a small TV with Nintendo. We went in and out for a solid night. We all remember it. After our friends moved, the new neighbors had us over and my brother and I went in the basement with fresh eyes of logical adults. Still nothing. No door, and we realized that there would have been virtually no room for us to sit comfortably because the basement only extended about 4 feet past the edge of the house. The room would have been under our friend's lawn. I know it's not outright scary, but I think it falls in the category of paranormal because it's just baffling. One experience stands out. In 2007, it was a normal day, approximately 4:30 or 5 p.m. in the autumn. Sun was still pretty bright. As I walked through the kitchen on my way to the garage, I suddenly felt something fuzzy behind me, like a static electricity charge close to my skin. I felt it in my whole body in the back of me. My back, the backs of my arms, back of my neck. At first, it felt kind of good, but then it began to intensify to the point where it began to feel scary to me. I was like, what the f? So I whirled around, and when I did, I saw a little man running toward me at full speed. He was transparent, like a shadow, and was dark brown. His entire body, face and all, was all the same color, brown, so I couldn't make out features. He didn't seem to be wearing clothes. He was child-sized, but had a big head and longish arms. He ran right up to me at high speed and disappeared. I wondered if perhaps he had gone inside me, but I didn't feel any different or act any different. I thought that he was probably going too fast to turn around and go around me to the side, so I figured he had probably jumped up into the ceiling. I asked myself, did that really just happen? And then I said to myself, yes, that really did just happen. At that point, I was wondering what to do next. Then I heard from my little sister's bedroom, my little sister yell, "You guys, you guys." So I ran in and turned on the light. My other sister also came in and she said, "What's the matter? Did you have a nightmare?" My little sister, who was about 7 at the time, just lay there on her bed. Her eyes were open, but she didn't say a word or even move, like she was in shock. I didn't ask her what had happened at that time. I was pretty sure she had seen what I'd seen. I'd like to note that at my house, the water heater is in the garage, and the garage door was open at the time. Also on this particular day, the furnace was off. There was no way I could have been having carbon monoxide poisoning, which supposedly can cause hallucinations. I have never used a single illegal drug or recreational drug. I do not use any medications and have almost never had to. I was not ill in any way, was mentally stable, and also working a steady job at the time and was a student. I do not drink or smoke or do anything out of the ordinary. I still am employed, I'm in college, and have been steadily for several years. I have no reason to suspect that I was hallucinating, especially since my younger sister also saw it. I believe what I saw was most likely a demon, also called a shadow person. It seems like he simply wandered into my house, messed with me, then messed with my sister, then left, as if he's just playing around being stupid. I have not since seen it, and my little sister is a perfectly normal kid, so I'm guessing she has not seen much more of this guy either. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button for more content in the future.